Before we start this video on the Titan, I just want to remind everybody I have over 220 other vehicles on my YouTube channel to watch. We've got the Ford F-250 Super Duty. Also did one on the Ford 3.5 EcoBoost. The Ford Raptor. The Toyota Tundra. And many more. So let's head on to the Titan test. Today we'll be driving the 2017 Nissan Titan. This is the heavy-duty XD version, which also has the Pro-4X off-road package and a decal on the side so all your neighbors will know you spent the extra money. In place of the gasoline V8, we get the Cummins turbo diesel V8. This one was all topped off with a bright yellow paint job that got a lot of attention on the street. I think it looks good. Some people didn't think so much. If you're wondering what the XD stands for, it's a cross between the light 1500 duties and the heavy duty 2500 series. Most 1500 series trucks are comfortable to drive day to day, but a bit strained when you tack on heavy loads. By comparison, the heavy-duty 2500 series trucks are great for towing and hauling heavy loads, but with those monster 8-liter engines that drink a lot of gas, and those heavy-duty suspensions really beat the tar out of you in daily driving. The XD is more of an in-between. For example, the tow rating of 12,300 pounds isn't that great over a typical quarter ton, but underneath you have a super strong frame, so you're far more comfortable towing that load than you would be with the 1500 series. According to the owner's manual, you have a maximum payload of 2,590 pounds. That's a bit more than the typical 1,650 pounds you get on a common quarter-ton truck. Here's a peek of the heavy-duty frame, which you'll appreciate when hauling heavy loads or going off-road. I'd crawl under and show you the rest, but I'm a sissy. I don't want to get dirty. And instead of a big gas-guzzling 7-liter engine, we get a more practical mid-size 5-liter diesel engine, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. And in daily driving, the suspension is far more comfortable than what you get on a lot of those bigger rigs, especially with an empty bed. But as you can see, this is a big rig. Getting those tight parking spaces at the shopping mall is not going to be easy, but that's the price you pay for having a large truck. You appreciate it when you're hauling all that gear, right? Another advantage of the XD, it's one of the least expensive diesels on the market. We'll take a look in detail right now. For a base price of $52,000 on the diesel, here's a list of all the goodies you get standard. That's the first row. Here's the second row. But as always, option packages to get into your wallet. Stuff we really don't need, but end up buying anyway. And there you go. Total tab. I realize the 52 to 60 grand price tag isn't really cheap, but compared to some of the big Ford and GMC diesels I've driven lately that run up to around 75 to 80 grand, let's just say it's less expensive. Just a note, you might have noticed that you don't see too many Titans on the road unless you live in a state where there are a lot of trucks, like Texas or Arizona. Well, there's a reason for that, because I got the sales charts out from last year. Let me read the list off to you. Last year, Ford sold 820,000 trucks. The GM Sierra and Chevy Silverado, same truck, just different badge, 800,000. Dodge Ram, 500,000. Toyota Tundra, 120,000. Titan, 22,000. So yes, I guess Ford could brag they sell more trucks in 2 weeks than Nissan does with the Titan all year. But what does that mean exactly? Does it mean it's a bad truck? No, not at all. In fact, over the years, I've asked people who drive other brand of trucks would they or would they not buy a Titan, and the reason they usually say no is because, quote unquote, I ain't never buying a Jap truck, I only buy American, unquote. So for those viewers thinking that way, I can point out that this vehicle was designed, engineered, and built totally in the USA and put together by American workers in Tennessee and Mississippi. So it's really not a foreign truck. And since Nissan is pretty much run by the French, not the Japanese, I don't think we should call that a Japanese truck in that regards either. And if you point out to the GM and Ram owners that their truck is most likely made and assembled in Mexico, you can tell by the tag on the door, that usually shuts them up pretty quick. So the bottom line, the Nissan Titan is not a bad truck, it's just been misunderstood. I'll also point out that for 2017, Nissan's on target to double their sales of the Titan, so perhaps a lot of people are getting the message. So after that long-winded speech, we'll cut to the chase, look at the features, and do some driving. We'll start with these giant LED headlights. We're going to take them out in the dark and see how they perform. We'll do that right now. It's dark enough. Let's give these headlights a test workout and see what happens. Here we have the headlights on a wall 100 feet away with a high beam, more than adequate light. Go to the low beam, horrible performance, doesn't even reach the wall, but there's a good factor here. I actually read the owner's manual before I drove the truck, and there's a knob on the dash where you can raise or lower the headlight adjustment. You press the knob, and there you go. Problem solved. Now we can see everything. If you own a Titan XD, you might want to find this button on the dash if you're driving at night. It makes a big, big difference. In fact, I'll go back to lowering it to demonstrate one more time. Here we have the high beams on a building 300 feet away. Certainly more than adequate. Go to the low beam. Now that we've adjusted the headlights, reaches out quite well. Actually better than any low beam I've used before. But if you set it back down to the lower position, this is what you get. The beam disappears. So for the rest of my driving, I'm raising the headlights all the way. If you do a lot of driving down dark streets, you can see the difference in the headlight adjustment. Big difference. The base engine in the XD series is a V8 gasoline engine, putting out 390 horsepower, 394 pounds-feet of torque. In this one we had the upgraded Cummins turbo diesel. It displaces 5 liters on a V8 platform, hooked to a 6-speed automatic transmission. Horsepower is lower, rated at 310 ponies, but the torque is 555 pounds-feet of torque at a low 1600 RPM, which comes in very handy for towing heavy loads. Since this is a heavy-duty truck, along the same lines as farm equipment, the EPA does not rate fuel economy for this rig. But that's why you're watching this video, because we're going to take it out on the road and see what the real figures are. So far I've been getting 14.3 mpg in mixed commuting, 65 to 70% expressway, and 30% city. We'll be doing more driving down the road to get more exact figures. A lot of trucks have storage bins on the side nowadays. The problem is they're not removable. Nissan gives us 2 storage bins here that are removable. They also double as ice chests. These are lockable, by the way. The room inside is limited because of the wheel bump, but you do have room for tools and things like that. But if you're planning on smuggling some relatives across the border, I think it's going to be too tight a fit. Oh, I'll get an email on that comment. Wait and see. Behind these panels you have large plug-ins for power tools and the like on the AC current. The ride height of this truck is high, so this retractable step certainly comes in handy when you're loading the bed. Folds right up when you're done. It's a 2-foot climb to get in the vehicle, so maybe we need a step for that too. But we don't get one. I'm not a big fan of running boards or steps anyway, so I'll just manage with this. You got a lot of room in the second row seating for hauling all your buddies and beer kegs. We've got a nice gauge cluster with useful information. A giant storage box in between the seats. More storage if you take the cup holders away. An easy to reach button for 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive, and low. And here are the climate controls. Can't get any simpler than that. And as any big truck would need, a 360-degree camera system for backing up, and one on the left for loading up a trailer. One thing that really stands out in the Titan is all of the buttons and knobs are big. So if you're wearing gloves, you won't have a problem operating them. Same with all the buttons down here. Overall, there's nothing fancy about the Titan XD's cabin, but there's nothing cheap about it either. All the materials are well made, very sturdy. No complaints whatsoever. Alright, let's do some driving, and as you see on the tachometer, this is a low revving engine maxing out at 4,000 RPM. And even though the maximum torque comes on at 1,600 RPM, there's a bit of turbo lag, so it really doesn't kick in around 2,000 RPM. But once it does, it really hauls. Yeah, it takes a while to get moving. You can feel the power once it spools up. And this engine is very quiet. And these brakes are excellent. Very heavy duty. Every time I do a speed bump test on those heavy duty 2500 series trucks with these stiff suspensions and empty bed, they really pound the tar out of me, knock the fillings out of my teeth. So we'll try the speed bump on this rig around 25 to 30 miles per hour and see what happens. So here we go. 25 miles per hour, first bump. Not bad. Second bump. Pretty smooth. Third bump. Here comes the nasty one. Heard it, but didn't feel too much. I'd say we passed. Definitely smoother than the 2500 series trucks, no doubt about that. The comfortable ride is even more apparent when you're running over railroad tracks. Didn't feel that either. I had mixed results about the power steering system. When you're driving on the freeway, it's light as a feather, no problem. In city traffic, it's rather light. When you're poking along at 5 miles per hour, it's extremely heavy. When the vehicle's not moving at all, you try to turn it, it's like there's no power steering at all. Takes some effort, believe me. Unless you're a 90-pound weakling, it's not going to be an issue. It's just kind of peculiar. I've never seen a system like this. We're going to be taking a highway trip. Elevation is going to be going from 1,200 feet to 6,500 feet. So naturally the figure will be a bit lower than average. But we'll see what happens. For those interested, 75 mile per hour cruising results in 2,000 RPM, which I find to be a little bit high, but that's what it is. This Nissan XD is a great highway cruiser. Very smooth, comfortable, and quiet. I could do this all day. So far my fuel economy says 18.5, but it appears I've run out of diesel exhaust fluid. Something you have to add every now and then. And I don't have any. So I'm going to have to pull over and find a store that's got it. And then we'll continue on. Only one store within 100 miles that sells diesel exhaust fluid. I got lucky. It was their last bottle. So let's get it in here and get running again. Let this be a warning for you. Always carry an extra can in the truck. This is $11 for 2.5 gallons in case you're curious. If you're in the habit of driving up steep hills, you're really going to love this Cummins turbo diesel. Very effortless power. The engine's not even breathing hard. We're at the end of our highway trip, climbing uphill 15.7. Not bad considering. We'll have the downhill trip coming up later on in the video. But first, we're going to get off pavement and see how this performs in the dirt. This is a moderately rough road. The typical 1500 series truck would be fairly comfortable, but would be bouncing all over the road. And when I've taken the heavy-duty 2500 series trucks on these trails, on an empty bed with a stiff suspension, these trucks just beat you to death. But in this particular XD, you can tell this has a heavy-duty frame because I'm hearing a lot of motion with the wheels and suspension, but none of it's reaching to the cabin. This is fairly comfortable. In fact, I've been passing trucks left and right going up this road. They can't keep up. I can. There's only one other truck I've driven on this road at this speed in total comfort, and that's the Ford Raptor. You know, this isn't as good as the Ford Raptor, but on a road like this, it's definitely the number 2 spot. If you want a heavy-duty truck to go off-roading, this is definitely for you. Got gobs and gobs of ground clearance. We're not going to have to worry about hitting any rocks on this trail. Nothing personal, sweetie, but you are one ugly heifer. I got a name for you. How about Hillary? Don't be insulted. Don't go away. We've been going down these dirt roads for a long time, so I think it's time to pull over and check the fuel economy. I'm kind of curious. Alright, let's see. 13.6, that was in 2-wheel drive, by the way. Not bad. More to come. One thing I like about this Cummins diesel setup, when you're on a rough road like this, you just leave your foot off the gas pedal, let the engine do the work. It chugs along just fine. Nice setup. Our fuel economy is remaining steady at 14.3 mpg. More than reasonable considering this rough terrain. It's time to reset the fuel economy figures. We're going to be taking the highway trip back into town. On this return trip, we'll be traveling from 6,500 feet to 1,200 feet. So I'm assuming our fuel economy figures will be slightly better compared to when we came up. We've reached the end of our return highway trip. We're going to pull over and check the fuel economy. Here's our return trip, 131 miles, averaging 70 miles per hour, 19.7 mpg on a downgrade. So 15.7 going uphill, 19.7 going downhill. Add it up, divide by 2, that gives us 17.5 miles per gallon for our highway trip. Pretty close to what I'd estimated at the beginning of this video. Considering the massive torque output of this engine and the overall weight of this vehicle, I would say that figure is rather reasonable. Here's my take on the Nissan Titan XD. If you're looking for a vehicle that's more sturdy than your typical 1500 series, but you don't want to go full-pledged on the 2500 series with their big engines, rough suspensions, and outrageous price tags, this is certainly a good in-between choice. It may be said the price tag of $60,000 is a bit steep, but remember, this was loaded up with just about everything that comes from the factory. You can save a lot of money by deleting the diesel option and going with the gasoline V8, and even more money if you get rid of a lot of the luxury packages we had. Remember, the base price of the XT starts around $35,000. So you have a lot of wiggle room to work with. The Nissan Titan is never going to have the big sales figures that we get from Ford, GM, and Ram. But if you're in the market for a truck, you really need to check this one out before you sign on the dotted line. It might help Nissan sell just one more.